Yeah, my name's Jon Martin. I work for BT Global Services, and my specialism, if you like, is unified communications. So what I'd like to talk to you this morning about is unified communications, what's happening to the unified communications market and the industry, and how you plan for unified communications within your organization and how you deploy it. So the first thing to start with is, what is unified communications? I think it's a term that we hear quite a lot. We hear it banded around, but what is it really? And there are definitions, like it's a multimodal system of communicating and operating in a coherent whole and all of those good things. But fundamentally, it's every which way we communicate combined together. So it's video, voice, instant messaging, desktop sharing, voicemail, email. It's even things like Facebook, LinkedIn, and so on, because they're all methods of communicating. And all of these methods of communications all work in both real time, as in a phone call or a video call, and non-real time, like email and Facebook and LinkedIn and so on. So those social media sites are all non-real-time communication systems. And what's important about these modalities is that they all should interact with each other. You need to be able to escalate through the modalities. So if you're instant messaging someone, you need to be able to turn that into a call, or turn that into a video call, or share your desktop. And it's in doing that that the real power of these systems really become apparent to their users. And for some organizations around the world, we're doing this now. In fact, BT's doing this now, but many large organizations, and I know in speaking to some of the people that are here today, they're starting to use systems like Microsoft Lync and so on, whether it's in Office 365 or they've implemented it themselves. And these kinds of systems actually do the kinds of things we're describing. The challenges to any business, though, or any organization, whether they're academic organizations or whether they're businesses, are how you deploy them, and deploying them in a cost-effective way that meets a business case, and you can actually understand the value that these kinds of systems bring. So if we look at a model for unified communications, I mentioned that some of the modalities have to work in real time, i.e. instantly, and some of them work in non-real time. The real-time modalities are really face-to-face meetings, the kind of meetings we have every day, but video, sharing, voice, and instant messaging. And I've kind of got instant messaging hovering the kind of real-time and non-real-time. And the reason is instant messaging, you can either use it as a real-time application, or you can choose not to answer. So if someone IMs you that you're kind of not overly keen on, you can choose to let them wait for 10 minutes while you answer that instant message. So it's a kind of halfway house between real-time and non-real-time. And if we look at the non-real-time things, that's things like voicemail, email, social media. And what we're beginning to see in the industry is some of these things actually changing in priority. Things like social media, which was probably quite low down on the scale of priority now, for instance, for students in an educational environment, would probably be their prime method of communication. So we're seeing some of these priorities actually change within the scale, so non-real-time being of a higher priority than real-time. But generally, we would say that a face-to-face meeting has a higher priority and social media has the lower priority. But it's important with all of these things that you can do it on a peer-to-peer basis. You can communicate with each other directly, or multi-party, i.e. a conference call or a video conference call with many parties joining, or you can broadcast as well. So, from an educational point of view, broadcast has a great deal of power. The other thing is presence. And for those of you not aware of what presence is presence really is the identification of what someone's doing at any one point in time. So whether they're busy, whether they're not busy, whether they're on the phone, whether they're on a call. So presence needs to be maintained across all of these modalities. And that's why it's important that you join these things together. So joining these things together, and I mentioned some of the systems that actually do that, is key. And things like Microsoft Lync do that. So they provide instant messaging, voicemail, desktop sharing and video, all in one solution. And you can be logged on from any device any phone, desktop. You can use a standard phone as well to link into these systems. So BT is starting to build these kinds of services for customers, global customers and customers here in the UK from our cloud solutions, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. The great thing that these sorts of systems bring, things like Lync bring, is they bring a lot of investment from other companies, and other companies are inventing and investing in endpoints that connect to these sorts of systems. And one of the ones I wanted to bring to your attention was the smart Lync room systems. These are video systems that enable you to have a video call and a voice call, but also share and display content. And you can create Lync rooms and have these kinds of equipment in, and you could run a remote lecture, for instance. You could have people joining from all over the world. You could interact this with Skype as well, so you could have people joining from Skype. So these are very powerful devices, and really reasonably priced. And so these kinds of things are being developed all the time. And on our stand, you've probably seen some of the video equipment and some of the different headsets we're doing for these kinds of solutions. And it really creates a very, very powerful method of communicating and educating. So if we look at where we communicate, I mentioned before that these applications can be loaded on many different devices. So I myself use Microsoft Lync actually as my main method of unified communications, but you could equally use Cisco capabilities as well, and there are other vendors that provide these services. But when I'm at home, and I work from home quite a lot, I have all of that capability that I described earlier. I don't have to be in the office to have that, and I can use it on my own personal computer. I can do it on the move because I have these applications on the iPhone, or I can work in the office in the normal way. So another requirement of all of these systems is that they have to work on many different platforms, many different endpoints, and many different devices, which these systems are actually starting to do. And in fact, if we take Microsoft Lync, you could be logged on 9 times on Microsoft Lync in all different devices, and they will all ring at the same time if someone calls you, or the instant message will fall to all devices at all times. So that makes you eminently contactable, and again, very, very powerful method of communicating. So when we look at these systems and helping our customers deploy these systems, one of the things is, how do we define a business case for this, and where do we see adding value? And very often that can be solved by looking at what these kinds of systems replace. So they'll replace your traditional telephone system, if you have any video room systems and so on. And because they combine together on single platforms, they will save money. So that's part of the business case. But another thing that needs to be done is understanding the business processes of your organization. Understand where these kinds of applications can save you money, whether they make you more efficient, more productive. So what we often do with customers is help them with their business case and work out which modalities are going to impact on which parts of their business and their business processes. So that's a clear way of demonstrating where value can be delivered. And very often, you can really streamline processes. And in the educational environment, using it in the educational environment could be extremely powerful with remote learning and so on. The next piece is really, where do you take your services from? And again, I'll start with the modalities that we would have within a UC solution. And then, where do you take them? Where do you surface these applications from? And traditionally, most organizations would have built these systems themselves within their own compute platforms. So their own, if they have some computing infrastructure, they would build them themselves on their own servers. What we're finding now, more and more of our customers are looking to dedicated cloud providers to actually provide these services for them, providing them a really cost-effective mechanism of actually gaining access to these applications. But equally, there are now public cloud services as well, things like Office 365 and so on, which provide a lot of the modalities described earlier at an incredibly reasonable price. And there's also cloud compute capability, which can also provide certain capabilities as well. So, things like Google and Amazon capability that can also be brought into the mix here about when you talk about all of these different applications. So you may choose to take these different applications from different places when you create your strategic roadmap for unified communications. But the important thing is the budget, as in how much it's going to cost, where you are, where your people are, and how they can consume these applications, and how secure they are, and how secure they need to be. The next part, and the part that's quite important to BT, is actually how you gain access to these systems. So obviously BT being a primary network provider, how you gain access to them is absolutely critical. So whether it's via MPLS networks, the internet, 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi, or even your own networks like Janet and so on, how you get access to these systems is absolutely critical to their performance. Some public cloud services can only be accessed via the internet, and certain levels of communication going backwards and forwards across to those platforms can cause communications problems. So sometimes dedicated cloud platforms provide the best method of communication. Sometimes enterprise compute, because you have that enterprise compute capability within your campus or within your own network, provides the fastest method of access. So it might be a little bit more expensive to build, but the actual cost of communication to that platform may be cheaper if you build it within your own infrastructure. So it's really important that you consider all of these things before you deploy these kinds of solutions. And again, it all comes back to money. In all of my conversations with customers, whether they're global multinational customers or whether they're government customers in the UK, the cost of the solution is absolutely key. The business case, as I mentioned earlier, is absolutely key to the decision that you make. So when we're creating our business cases and so on, the strategic roadmap that we create is absolutely critical. And it needs to include all of the things that we described earlier. So that's unified communications modalities, as I described earlier. It's where your people are and what roles they perform. So you might limit certain roles within an organization to certain modalities. So you might only give voice and instant messaging to one member of your workforce or team. You might give all of the modalities to other members of the team. So depending on the role that they perform would depend on what modalities you actually give them. And most of these systems allow you to allocate different modalities to different individuals within your organization. I mentioned earlier about where you take these applications from. Again, that will have a massive implication on your business case. Other things to consider are the security of your systems and the data that you're maintaining. Most of these kinds of systems actually store and maintain the conversation histories. You can choose not to store them, but many of them do. So those conversation histories need to be kept secure, and it needs to be understood who can have access to those conversation histories. Also, the regulatory environment that you happen to be in. I happen to deal with many different market sectors with different regulations and so on, but I'm sure your sector equally has regulations and so on that you need to adhere to, and they often can cost you more money if you have to work around certain regulatory environments. And also the network infrastructure, which I mentioned earlier. So in the round, all of these things need to be considered when you're deploying these kinds of applications. This leads me on to a strategic roadmap. This is an example roadmap for one customer, but I've taken all of the modalities and some other dynamics, if you like, and mapped them over a period. One thing that's clear is most organizations that are deploying unified communications don't do it in a hurry. It's not a big bang solution. It's done over time. And for some really large multinational companies, that may be a 3-year rollout for enterprise voice, for instance, if you're providing voice. But this is an example here of where a customer is looking at all of their modalities in their across their entire organization. This is a global customer, in fact, in this example. And actually looking at what we're going to do for them for video, for desktop sharing, for voice, and for instant messaging, and for the non-real-time modalities as well. So this customer, if we take video, for instance, has video rooms, so they're Polycom video rooms, but they also want to deploy Lync, so we need to connect those two systems together. And we're using a Polycom product to actually do that. So we're connecting their room systems to their pervasive video system, which is obviously going to be Microsoft Lync. From an instant messaging point of view, they used to be an OCS user, and now they're moving to Lync, so we're going to do the migration for them there. For email and for social media, they're moving to Office 365. So they're doing SharePoint and they're using Yammer for social media. And so you can see the migration there. And this is all being planned out over time. And what Unified Communications is doing is there are certain systems like Lync drawing together a number of different modalities. And that's causing, saving in money and so on. But also, it enables us to look at different things like the people dynamic inside an organization, how we communicate. And actually planning for that is actually a key thing, and a key thing that determines success. So if we think about people that are working in an office, for instance, traditionally using a phone, they're no longer going to be using a desk phone. They're probably going to be using a headset connected either to their mobile device or to their PC. So how people work is absolutely critical, and it could help you make some key choices. It means that more people could perhaps work from home because they have these capabilities, and these capabilities enable them to do that. So it really does change the dynamic within your organization and how people work. Again, planning for how your network infrastructure will be impacted, because creating and managing all of this media will create a lot more network demand and a lot more network traffic. So it's important to understand that. And the regulatory environment I mentioned earlier. Another key one is security policies. Most organizations would have a security policy, and it's absolutely important that the security policies are maintained and updated to allow for cloud and cloud services, whether they're public cloud services or dedicated cloud. It's very, very different from managing and running your own computing capability. So a summary of the material that I've shown so far is basically understanding the power of these capabilities. Understanding what they can bring to your business is absolutely key when you're creating a business case in terms of total cost of ownership and return on investment. And for those of you who haven't seen these capabilities in action, you should really take the opportunity to show, look at them and understand them, and come and have a chat with me afterwards, and we can show some of these things working on iPhones and iPads and so on, or we can arrange some demonstrations for you. Another really useful thing to do is the role analysis that I mentioned earlier, understanding what people do, understanding how these modalities can impact on what they do, and how these roles can be changed within the organization. The network impact assessment that I mentioned earlier, also key. Developing a business case and to actually deploy these solutions is also a key activity that needs to be undertaken. The strategic roadmap that I described earlier, having a plan for when you will deploy these different modalities, is another piece of work that's absolutely key. Knowing when you're going to switch over to different solutions, planning for it, communicating it with it, educating people so that they know what's coming, again, absolutely key. And the other thing is just to be aware of the technology and how it's changing and how it can impact and improve your business or your organization. I've been in this industry for many, many years, and this is probably the greatest rapid point of change that I've seen. And systems are changing all of the time. And although the systems that we see now are absolutely the key ones, and BT is actually really, really keen in supporting these main systems from Cisco and from Microsoft and so on, things will change within the next 2 years and the next 3 years, and you need to be able to plan for that. The market is a very, very exciting place, and social media combined with unified communications is going to have a dramatic impact on how we communicate with each other, how we educate people, and it's going to have a dramatic impact on how we work and where we work. The last thing I'd really like to cover is actually BT's portfolio and how we are addressing this market. We have a portfolio called the BT1 portfolio, and it's fundamentally divided into 4 sections: one voice, one enterprise, one cloud, and one collaborate. Our one voice portfolio is about basically our network voice solutions. That's SIP trunks, PSTN, we have global VPNs as well. We have one voice capabilities and networks and so on that really provide connectivity, global connectivity to the PSTN. Our collaborate portfolio is fundamentally all of our conferencing capability. That's our video conferencing capability, that's our audio conferencing capability, and includes some really innovative products. So things like Dolby audio conferencing, where we can add spatial awareness to a conference call, so that if you're talking to 10 different people, they appear in different places within your headset and so on. So we're doing some really interesting work in the Collaborate portfolio. And finally, we come on to our application piece, which is our enterprise portfolio and our cloud portfolio. The enterprise portfolio, we can deploy Lync, any of the Cisco capabilities like Jabber and Call Manager and so on, and also products also from Avaya. And we provide these on a managed service basis, and we deploy them within customers' enterprises. Our cloud services, which is kind of where we're concentrating a huge amount of effort and investment now, are delivered from BT data centers, accessed either via the internet or from a private network. And we can deliver Cloud Link, that's full enterprise link, and we can deliver it to anywhere in the world, actually. We have platforms across the globe. We can also do this with Microsoft Exchange, which is the email system, and SharePoint for collaboration solutions. And all of our cloud services are charged on a monthly basis per seat. So, they avoid the need for capital. We can do this with Cloud Cisco, and we're also one of the key providers of Cisco HCS. And much of the Cisco capability is very, very similar to the Microsoft capability that I described earlier, working in a very similar fashion. We also have some specific voice cloud services which we deploy for government. We can also provide pilots for any of these systems. I've got Lync pilots here described on the screen, but we can create pilots for any of the services within the cloud to give customers and organizations a taste of what the product would be like if they were to deploy. This is all wrapped around, our consistent service model and our professional services capability. So we can also provide professional services capability around any of these things that I've described here today. And much of the things that I've described around creating roadmaps and advising customers on their UC strategies and so on can all be provided around professional services, all within our model for deployment and service. And I think that's all I wanted to cover today, so thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we've got time for any questions. If anyone's raised any questions on that. Anyone? No? One thing I was wondering about was, would you have any case studies or something like on particular deployment of unified communications within preferably universities or colleges, but
Yeah, we have sets of case studies on virtually all of our products, so yeah, we could certainly do. Whether we've got relevant ones in the educational space for all of our products, I think, but we could certainly provide case studies, that's not a problem. And BT themselves use all of these products internally as well, so it's very easy, obviously, for us to demonstrate the capability too. But yeah, we can provide case studies, yes.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, we've got a bit of time at the moment. Sorry, yes.
How are we going to help our customers with adoption of this type of technology?
Adoption. So we obviously have full programs for rollouts and so on, so we assist our customers roll these kinds of solutions out. we have educational material as well, so we do training for all of our solutions. So we have online training capability. We can also do online classroom training where you can actually use the product to actually gain access, and you're taught online how to use the product in a more productive way. And we can also do classroom training for some of these systems as well. So from an adoption point of view, we can provide all of that material. Yeah, I'm sure that will come, because we, BT ourselves, create a number of different clouds for different markets. We create special environments for finance communities. G Cloud, government cloud services certainly exist and certainly being discussed as part of the PSN framework and so on. And so I wouldn't think it would be unusual to create something specific for education, so that a number of organisations could share in that investment, and I think that would be highly likely. And I'd be more than happy to join in that debate, to be honest with you. Yeah, hybrid environments certainly exist, and many of our customers today take email, for instance, from Office 365, but would take Lync out of Microsoft's cloud in our cloud, because we provide a true enterprise voice capability to dial out to the PSTN, so you can actually dial out with numbers, whereas Office 365 currently you can't do that. I mean, there's talk about them having some sort of Skype capability in the future, and I'm sure that will come, but we provide a proper secure enterprise voice solution from our cloud. But there's nothing to say you couldn't take, as I described earlier, Exchange from Office 365, perhaps SharePoint from Office 365, and a Lync voice solution from BT, and combine all three together in a hybrid environment. Yeah. Well, you can even split Lync, so you can have some users stay within Microsoft's cloud and have some users within our platforms, because you can have a split domain with Office 365. So you could gradually move users rather than moving everyone wholesale off Microsoft's cloud and then onto our cloud. So you could migrate them as and when you see fit. So if you have telephony switches going end of life, that would be obviously a good chance to, and a good opportunity to move them off that switch, move them onto a UC platform that has all of that functionality built in. So you no longer have a traditional phone system, you have a UC system that gives you voice capability and all of those other great things as well. I mean, conferencing alone is a very, very powerful capability, and some organisations pay for a conferencing capability, and BT runs those conferencing capabilities, but many organisations see the savings alone in conference calls, for instance, actually paying for a lot of this kind of infrastructure. So, the business case is fairly easily justified. With Office 365, you can still have conferencing capability, but you still need to maintain your audio conferencing platform, and then connect that into Office 365. Whereas with our Lync platform, you can just dial in straight to the platform. Yeah.